A second woman has come out with her perspective and her story with Joe Biden. And she's alleging that Joe Biden also touched her in a way that made her feel uncomfortable. Her name is Amy Lapos, and she told the Hartford Courant that Biden grabbed her by the head and rubbed noses with her during a 2009 political fundraiser. Lapos said the alleged interaction occurred when she was volunteering at a fundraising luncheon for Representative Jim Himes, who she worked for as a congressional aide at the time. And finally, she says, quote, "It wasn't sexual, but he did grab me by my head. He put his hand around my neck and pulled me in to rub noses with him, or with me. When he was pulling me in, I thought he was going to kiss me on the mouth. Now he didn't, he just rubbed noses with her."
Yeah.
Creepy. Like, don't do that. It's a bad idea. It's a bad idea. That's all I have to say about it.
It is also amazing that it took the Me Too movement, it took a possible presidential run for someone to actually discuss this publicly. Because a lot of shows have made passing comments about Biden and his interactions with women. We made more than passing comments throughout. We said, why does he keep doing that? That's crazy. But there's this attitude that Lucy Flores correctly points out, that boys will be boys and Biden will be Biden. And I have to confess that I've been guilty of thinking Biden will be Biden. But no, you can't keep doing something wrong just because you've been doing it. And look, it reminds me, this is maybe a weird example, but of the story out of one of Malcolm Gladwell's books about why the South Korean airlines used to crash more often. It doesn't anymore, but it used to, and they couldn't figure out why. The engines worked, everything worked well, the training was great. The reason was because in the Korean culture, it was so wrong to correct an elder that the co-pilots would not correct the pilot, even if he was gonna run into a mountain. And they'd run into mountains, they'd crash the plane, everyone on board, including the co-pilot, the pilot, everyone would die. But the culture was so strong that they still wouldn't correct the pilot. And so that's how strong a culture can be. And so I understand that there was this culture where men got to do this to women and it was no big deal. Hey, I'm calling you honey, I'm calling you sweetie. A lot of people still do that. And a lot of people think there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. Or touching the shoulders, touching the hair, smelling the hair, that's weird, that's
super
really weird. Okay, but there's a range, and there's this cultural divide. And so this is a great opportunity, whether you're going to judge Biden for it or not, to at least have that conversation so you tell the older generation, hey, the culture has changed and that's not acceptable anymore.
Now, Joe Biden did respond to what Lucy Flores shared in her piece in The Cut, and he has not apologized for it. But what you're about to hear is a part of his statement and Lucy Flores's reaction. Take a look.
Vice President Biden and his team just released a statement just moments ago from Mr. Biden. Here's what it says, quote, "In my many years on the campaign trail and in public life, I have offered countless handshakes, hugs, expressions of affection, support, and comfort. And not once, never did I believe I acted inappropriately. If it is suggested I did so, I will listen respectfully, but it was never my intention. We have arrived at an important time when women feel they can and should relate their experiences and men should pay attention, and I will," unquote. What's your response?
Well, I certainly think that it's better than his first statement that they released on Saturday. I'm glad that he's willing to listen. I'm glad that he is clarifying his intentions. Frankly, my point was never about his intentions, and they shouldn't be about his intentions. It should be about the women on the receiving end of that behavior. And this isn't the first time, and it wasn't the only incident where he was acting inappropriately with women. If he is saying that he never believed that that was inappropriate, then frankly, I think that's a little bit of a disconnect and not being aware, a very sense of not being aware, because there has been documentation, both in photos, videos, stories that were written, Now, that being said, I think that part of the reason why I decided to finally say something is because those behaviors were not being taken very seriously. They were not being considered from the perspective of the woman on the other side of that power dynamic.
So I want to add a little more to what Flores said. Look, Joe Biden was the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee during the Anita Hill hearings. And lately, he's been apologizing for the way that those hearings were conducted. He's apologizing for the way that Professor Hill was treated during those hearings. And so I fail to understand how he could look back at the treatment of Anita Hill back then and understand the prevalence and the impact of harassment and somehow still not understand how some women would not want to be touched without consent, whether it's rubbing noses or a kiss on the back of the head in a professional setting. Like how is it that he didn't realize, oh, maybe the way that I behave around other women could make them uncomfortable and maybe I should really rethink this. One other thing I want to note is, look, I'm really tired of people trying to coddle presidential candidates. I know he hasn't announced yet, but he is possibly gonna run for president of the United States. And I would argue that the president of the United States should be in tune with what the culture is in the country and what is and is not acceptable behavior around men and women, right? What is and is not considered going too far when it comes to physical contact. If we're gonna keep making excuses for someone who's gonna run for president of the United States, well then, we get what we deserve, right? We get a president who doesn't actually understand what our culture is and how much it's evolved since the 1960s.
Yeah, I understand. I'm just gonna keep emphasizing this one point. And the allegation that came from Amy Lapos today that Anna read you a little while ago, she went on to say there's absolutely a line of decency. There's a line of respect. Crossing that line is not grandfatherly, it's not cultural, it's not affection, it's sexism or misogyny. And the caveat that I would put to that, or my, not caveat, but my interpretation of that is, I just wanted everyone to acknowledge that maybe it's both, that it is cultural and it's also sexist and misogynistic. So that maybe our culture growing up in a time when men were in charge and didn't have to care about women's feelings and didn't have to worry about if it crossed the line if you kissed a woman in the back of her head or smelled her hair. So the only thing I'm pushing back on is that it's not cultural, because I can see it with my own eyes. And you guys wrote in while we've been doing the show live. Yes, for older generations, it's definitely cultural. But that doesn't mean that it's right. It doesn't mean that we should continue it. It's like, when in the South they say, hey man, we're proud of our heritage. And slavery was part of our heritage. Well, we shouldn't be proud of that. And so some parts of your heritage were terrible. And it's okay to say, hey, I'm glad we got past that and we changed that part of our heritage. So I think saying that it's not cultural makes it seem like Biden is the only one on the planet who's ever done it. And I don't think that's necessarily fair to him. And some of you might not care to be fair to him, but I don't think it's right. I don't think it's correct. On the other hand, saying that it's cultural doesn't mean that you could say, oh, so what? He's gonna keep on doing it and it's no big deal and anyone gets to do it because it was part of our culture. No, this is the time to draw the line.
By the way, we have a plethora of old white men running around in Congress. So are there a ton of stories of current members of Congress behaving in this way? And do we make excuses for them by saying, oh, it's just a cultural disconnect? I don't know, maybe there are other men who do the same thing and we just don't hear about it. But I would argue that he's not the only older man in politics right now.
Thanks for watching this free clip of the Young Turks. Don't forget to become a TYT member today. For more exclusive content, join now at tyt.com/join.